Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a classic review of the Slint album, Spiderland. Kentucky rock band, this is their 1991 album, sophomore LP, and it is one of the most pivotal albums in underground rock music. Slint has an incredibly short discography, just a few albums. Their debut LP they recorded with Steve Albini, maybe 3 albums if you count the record many of the band members in Slint released when they were in an entirely different band. They followed this album up with a little EP that's actually pretty awesome. But still, despite how little Slint songs there are, their music has been incredibly popular and impactful. Some of the earliest and most pivotal pieces of music in math rock as well as post-hardcore, the band's tendency toward repetition and growing musical intensity leaves a lot of people throwing the post-rock tag on them as well. But for me personally, this record has always been a difficult album to define genre-wise. The odd time signatures and jagged grooves on this record, exemplified through the drum beats and the riffs, might align with math rock, but I wouldn't really say it's a defining characteristic of this record. Maybe more of a subtle detail you might eat up as you are diving into the inner workings of these grooves. And the music here is certainly influenced by punk as well as hardcore punk, but only in the sense that the sounds on this record are really bare, they're stripped back, they're very direct and straightforward. Outside of that, there isn't a lot of throttling, explosive viscera on this record. A lot of these songs are very long, they're very winding, they're very patient. This is not your average rock album in terms of feel. The music here is very still, it's very hypnotic. I would say it's reserved most of the time, and when it does manage to get loud, the music just turns into an intense descent into depression. There are very dry, thin, emotionally drained guitars and bass guitar all over this record, riding very rigid grooves, maybe until there's a blast of distorted chords that kind of breaks the endlessly growing tension. A lot of the time I actually find the drumming of Britt Walford to be way more expressive than the guitars. He put some killer fills into this album. I really think his fills are very dramatic and purposefully so against the kind of stiff guitars and bass that Ethan Buckler and David Pajo deliver throughout a majority of this album. This LP has a very basic and simple but very interesting instrumental character, but a lot of the time it's really about Brian McMahon's vocals for me. I think his vocals really set the group apart from other artists who might have been doing similar things around this time. And even though the guitars, the bass by themselves are certainly drained, taxed, the vocals really help bring that emotion home. A lot of the time Brian is delivering this deadpan, standoffish, whisper quiet spoken word. He could be delivering poetry or telling stories, and this actually draws me in more than it turns me off. I think it conveys a certain kind of expression to have vocals this quiet, and the fact that there isn't a lot of reverb here, there isn't a lot of overdubbing cluttering the mix. If you just lean in and listen closely, the vocals are pretty readable. In a way, I actually find this vocal approach to be kind of eerie and twisted a lot of the time. So with this record, basically you're getting this rock instrumentation executing this fantastic tension-building repetition, and it's peppered with some great drum fills, some interesting lyrics, and some very simple but effective guitar leads and phrases. Again, this album has a different emotional character than most rock LPs, and there are so few albums out there exactly like it despite its popularity. And I think that's partially because this record doesn't come down to just its compositional elements. Its emotional character is really important. I don't think there are a lot of artists out there brave enough or maybe even capable enough to come out with a record this blatantly dismal. As far as the content on this record, we are getting 6 tracks. They run up to 40 minutes in time. They're each 5 to 8 minutes each. And the record kicks off with the very patient Breadcrumb Trail, a song guided by this plucked, ringing harmonic guitar line. And lyrically, the song starts off with a pretty unassuming story. If you're not familiar with the record, the vocals might seem kind of off-putting as to how quiet they are. They might not seem like a focus, but really you should be zooming in on these lyrics. And it's a tale about, I guess, being at a carnival, a theme park, a sideshow, coming across a fortune teller. Our protagonist seems to turn down having his fortune told and instead opts for going on the roller coaster, which might in fact be symbolic because as soon as this part is over, the guitars explode and we're getting all this surreal roller coaster imagery, which is being delivered against these supremely slow, heavy, sinister riffs that make old school Sabbath seem like upbeat. The song is pretty nightmarish after this point, eventually coasts into a really dissonant interlude and circles back around to the very tame and reserved plucked harmonic riff that kicked the entire song off. This song is like being transported suddenly to a really horrible place and then you just find yourself back where you started. And the next track on here actually is quite obviously nightmarish, the song Nosferatu Man. There is an awesome screaming guitar lead that plays throughout much of this song, really evil stuff. We get lyrics about this Nosferatu man living in a castle, trying to please his queen, drinking blood. Lyrically, instrumentally, this is definitely one of the more straightforward tracks on the record, but still, it is kind of abstract. The point of this song and the point of Breadcrumb Trail, the moral of the story, as it were, isn't exactly obvious or anything like that. I don't necessarily get these stories because I don't think you're supposed to get them in an obvious way. However, I do feel them. I do think they are emotionally stirring. As is the track Untitled Man, which is one of the more reserved songs on here, mostly acoustic. A lot of the time you're getting this fast but very quiet guitar strumming on the track as we get this story, the inner thoughts of one Don, who seems to have stepped outside for a moment at a party to kind of collect his thoughts, and he seems to be kind of suffering from some serious social anxiety. And the lyrics get pretty detailed as to what exactly he's focusing in on and is making him so miserable. He ends up leaving the party, going back home, I guess angry or depressed. He wakes up the next morning, looks at himself in the mirror, takes responsibility. Maybe this is kind of a turning point where he decides he's gonna try to fix these problems, and it's kind of surprising. There's no wallowing in one's self-pity on this track. There are no rash decisions made or anything like that. It's like a mature decision was made in a rock song. Whoa. But keep in mind, with this track and other songs on here, there's no big catchy hook or anything like that. You're talking about mostly linear song structures that are very repetitive, and really it's the story and it's the lyrics that are kind of providing variation and moving the song from point A to point B. This is very quiet, this is very subtle, this is very introspective music. And the album continues with that theme on the song Washer, with this twinkly, sad, little descending guitar line against the bass and drums, and we're getting this tale of what seems like somebody saying goodbye to their lover, maybe as they are asleep, maybe it's a note. It doesn't feel like the person the protagonist is talking to is really there. Maybe he's talking to this person in his head from beyond the grave. I'm not really sure, but he is saying goodbye, and in a really dramatic way. It doesn't seem like, he's just going out to the store or anything like that. This may be a final goodbye, or maybe a goodbye saying that he's gonna go, he needs to leave, and he doesn't know when he'll be back. And after this goodbye is established, the lyrics really focus on the darkness and the loneliness this person might be sort of having to deal with, the fear that they might be experiencing after this person sort of disappears into the night. This is also the longest track in the record here and has one of the biggest crescendos toward the end of the song too. The album coasts into a little instrumental, and then with the final track makes way for my favorite song on the entire record, Good Morning Captain. The tiny, shrunk down, eerie and tinny guitar chords that kick this album off are a fantastic contrast to the numbing bass line. The guitars and the drums on the verses here are so incredibly quiet, and it really sets the stage for my favorite set of lyrics on the album. We get lines about, quite literally, a captain of a ship who seems to have lost his ship in a storm, and now he's facing death. Everyone's gone. I'm just assuming he's totally alone now. And these seem to be his last words, his last thoughts. Is he just talking to himself, talking in general? And as if the music couldn't get any quieter, it does, just before this explosive wall of guitars just changes the flavor of the song entirely and just turns really, really just sad. It seems like our protagonist here is talking to maybe someone he wishes he could see one final time before he dies right here in the middle of the ocean, saying, "I miss you, I'm sorry." Really twisted stuff. few rock albums, in my opinion, exemplify the word tortured in the truest sense. But what I think is so great about this album is that the way it goes about expressing those feelings is either different from what other rock bands might do. It doesn't seem like it just focuses on, oh, my feelings are this, my feelings are this, I feel tortured, me personally, me. Slint isn't really obvious like that, and it's part of what makes this album so enjoyable. There's something so simple and bare and skeletal about the music on this album, and yet there's something really mysterious and kind of shadowy about it too. But if anything is for sure with this record, it's that its a melancholy is incredibly strong, incredibly potent, and I think that's why this album is so fan-diddly-tastic. If you've given this album a listen, what do you think of it? Is it one of your favorites of all time? Why do you love it so much? And what classics do you think I should consider reviewing next? You're the best. Transition! I love you, 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 I love you! I hope you have a good day. And, yeah. Anthony Fantano, Slint Spiderland, forever.